Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight I wanted to take a look at an issue that I'm sure Black men around the world can probably identify with. It seems that wherever there are men or women of African descent, you find this type of sexual stereotype that goes with just being a Black male or Black female that happens to be, well, you're of African ancestry. So certain images, stereotypes come with that. Um, I only recently discovered, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, the origins of this idea uh, that there are differences that distinguish Black men and men of other races in terms of sex, right? Definitely, this is not the platform to get into that, but if you keep digging, you'll find what I'm talking about. And it seems wherever there are Black men, that stereotype is pretty, it's alive and well wherever you go. It didn't take long after I started digging into Brazilian culture that I started discovering these stereotypes about Black men in Brazil as well. I'll have to explore that a little bit more in future posts so that, again, once again, in the videos that I'm creating these days is to create, just give everything that I've learned and I continue to learn about how race plays out in Brazil, and to just put everything in a context for people who may not be familiar with racial politics in Brazil. You'll find, if you're familiar with how this works in the United States, you'll probably be very familiar with how things are seen in Brazil, because they're pretty similar in many ways. So this is a piece that I posted back in September of 2016, and it's the title of the article: Hypersexualization and the Self-Esteem of the Black Man, the Need for the Abandonment of a Racist Fetish. So let's just get right into the article. This is the man who's the author of this article. Um, how my blog is set up, I've always said that I introduce the material myself and I share my opinion on it. But from the beginning that I started blogging, I wanted to give the opportunity to let Black Brazilians speak for themselves, or Brazilians in general who are, talking about the race issue, to get a full understanding of how people see race. I'll even put an article up by like a white Brazilian, because they'll sometimes have some intriguing things to say about how they interpret race, how they deny that Brazil can have definitely racist sentiments, or those white people who are daring enough to step forward and says, "Look, I know racism is a problem here because I, as a white person, I experienced this, because I have a friend who this happened to." Or there was one particular story I remember some years ago where this white guy, green eyes, straight hair, very clearly white man. He was applying for some job. It might have been in college academia or something. I can't remember. I have to pull the story up. But he talked about how the selection for the job, to fill the job, came down between him and this Black guy. And he says when he compared his resume, the two, finalists for that position, they met each other. He discovered that the last two, he was white, and then the other guy was Black. And some kind of way he knew what the guy's resume looked like. And he says that this Black guy's resume was just ran circles around his own. He was like, this guy was clearly more qualified than me, but this guy ended up getting the job. And he was like, the only way I can explain this for, man, I mean, in every area, he had much more experience than me. He had more certificates. He had more achievements. Everything around him, everything in the competition between the two of them, the Black guy was more qualified, and the white guy ended up getting the job. And he knew it was like, they prefer white faces. It's just like, regardless of how people feel that structural racism or institutional racism should be dealt with. That's another topic. But when you have white people step forward and say, like, yes, I do have an advantage because I personally saw it, then that's something else. Um, I'm really looking to see how Brazil is going to shift with the re-election of Lula da Silva, because what I've seen over in the last few years in the United States is that there's been like a strong shift to the left that citizens in the United States are starting to turn away from that. And so, whereas some years ago I would have looked and said that the re-election of Lula would have been a great thing for Brazil, I'm kind of curious about what that's going to mean when he takes office in 2023. But I'm getting way off the topic. Let me get back to where I was at. So again, the title of this article, Hypersexualization and the Self-Esteem of the Black Man, the Need for the Abandonment of a Racist Fetish. And we've heard a lot of African Americans, males in the last few years talking about how it seems that a lot of women, like a lot of white women, objectify them. Stop stereotyping us, stop objectifying us, right? In many circles, I know that Black men, they appreciate this sort of adoration or this hint that women of other races are interested in them, right? But what happens when you discover that it's not that she's necessarily into you as a person, but she's into you as a fetish, as if, I've never been with a Black man before. I've heard about those Black guys. So instead of looking at you as a whole person, what happens when this person is looking at you according to the fetish and the stereotype that's built within being a Black man? You'll find this same thing that goes on in Brazil. So this is what the author of this article is talking about today. So in terms of this article, very, very important text here. In numerous past articles, we've touched upon the very sensitive issue of the solidão da mulher negra, meaning the solitude or the loneliness of the Black woman, in a number of thought-provoking personal pieces in which Afro-Brazilian women express their frustration, confusion, and anger over an apparent abandonment on the part of Afro-Brazilian men. So the solidão of the Black woman in Brazil is a topic that's been discussed up and down for a number of years. As I said, when I first became aware of this issue, if I had to say, it was surprising, because even as I was studying race, I was under the impression that there just wasn't any sentiment that says, look, why do Black men abandon Black women? Why are they leaving us for white women? I didn't really discover that there was this type of sentiment until 2005, 5 years after I had really been digging into Brazilian history. And then starting in around 2013 or 2014, there was just Black women through Facebook and previously in Orchid, social media and blogs. The idea, the question of why it seemed that all prominent Black men just stampeded over Black women to get the white women, right? And again, even having studied race for, up to that point, 5 years, I was under the impression like, hey, Black and white mixes here with no problems. Nobody feels any problems with that. But when Black women started getting access to the internet and going to college, this became a topic and people were talking about it. It had actually come up previously in a magazine that I had read, the Brazil's only magazine targeted at the Afro-Brazilian population, Raça Brazil. I did a video on this a couple of weeks back. And I remember reading those interviews. I remember, roundtable discussions asking why it seemed so many Black men were marrying white women, right? This led to what people defined as the solidão da mulher negra, which is the solitude or loneliness of Black women. In my years going back and forth to Brazil, I'd heard just numerous stories of Black women who felt like, look, Black men don't want anything with a Black woman except maybe, a casual, let's say friends with benefits type relationship. And I would hear this story from woman after woman. And I always like, what's going on here? So there's a number of articles I have on this blog that talks or approaches this issue of the loneliness and solidão. Loneliness and solitude of the Black woman, right? A lot of these articles are pretty thought-provoking. They even gave a name to Black men, but it can be applied to Black women too. This idea of we'll do anything to get with someone with white skin, and they call this palmitagem. This was an intriguing personal piece. Loving a black man can hurt to get ahead in life. That I have to get into that one too. That was the woman's history, her story is so typical, but she brought out some points that were really worth thinking about. This is an article I did on Afro-Dango, and it was the first time that I've known in Brazil where black people were saying, look, we need to start hooking up black love. We need black men and black women to start getting together. So somebody actually created a community, and now there's an app out that's trying to bring black men and black women together in the country because, as many people have said, we have been just indoctrinated to prefer white skin in our relationships. So anyway, in these articles, these women call out what they see as the black man's preference for white women. Along the way, some of our readers have expressed disappointment in what some see as the assassination of the black male character in only speaking on interracial relationships from the perspective of black women. On my part, I would like to point out the fact that there have also been quite a few replies from black Brazilian men and groups who point out the fact that an apparent adoration of white skin is not unique to black men of Brazil, but black Brazilians as a whole, which includes the black female population. Let me see which one of these. So you can't really understand racial politics in Brazil until you're ready to dive into the issue of interracial relationships. And there are a number on this blog talking about Brazil had its own eugenics movement where they were creating a plan. It was a form of social engineering to indoctrinate black people to prefer white skin. And so this is racism in interracial relationships when black people are taught to overvalue whiteness, right? On the swirling tendencies of black women justifying their interracial relationships without being shamed like black men. Increasingly over the years, I've seen more and more people talking about how when I said this, when I first started coming to Brazil, people looked at me as the radical American, but eventually black Brazilians started catching on to this and they started questioning the history of this plan for black people to disappear through miscegenation. This article, Miscegenation Destroys Black People. Interracial relationships and the decision not to have relationships with whites. People are waking up to this agenda. The social construction of preference and interracial relationships. Black Brazilian women on Black Brazilian men and white women. So a whole lot of pieces that I have here. You know, I'm going to be covering these one by one as we go on. Let's get back into the original article here. So in reality, the idea of palmitagem, a term that refers to black men who seem to have a preference for white women, actually can be applied to both sides, as was pointed out in an article that took black women to task for crucifying black men when black women were just as guilty. So this is an article I have to, when it appears, I want to see what the year this article is, because after article and just hundreds and thousands of comments of black women calling out black men for seemingly having a preference for white women, black men started pushing back. Like, you know, why do black women blame black men for wanting white women when they too worship white men? We as black people have all been conditioned. And so I put this article together. And there were a number of, these are all prominent black Brazilian women. You know, this is the singer Ludmilla. She actually came out as a lesbian. She's been with a woman for several years now. This is actress Camila Pitanga. This is actress Erika Januza. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Erika Januza with a, you know, black man. That's not to say that's her fault. It could be a possibility that black men simply pass her over. Who's to say? That's why in some ways I can't really judge what's going on here because everybody individually has a story. This is Marina Silva. She ran for president maybe, I guess that was it had to have been about 8 years ago. This is a popular singer, Gabi Amarantos, with her British filmmaker boyfriend. I don't know if they're still together. This article is from a few years ago. You know, popular actress Aline Weirley with her husband, you know, an actor, what is it, Igor Hikili, they call him. This is Ilgi Silva with her boyfriend. She's a popular actress. This is a popular carnival dancer with her Italian husband. You know, and it just goes on and on. You know, all of these people. The question being, it's like, how do you point out that black men do this. This guy doesn't really look white to me. It really depends. He clearly is not white, but would you argue that he's black? I guess we would have to see a better picture, but this goes on and on. And so again, the question is, how are black women calling out black men when it seems that they're just as likely to date or get in serious relationships with white men? I mean, well, how do you respond to that? I mean, this is one of the pieces I did some time back, was just asking, like, black men and black women in Brazil were pointing a finger at each other. You're a pomiteiro. No, you're a pomiteiro, saying you're a person who hates yourself and you prefer, people with white skin for dating and reproducing, right? So anyway, where are we here? It's true, and there's no reason to deny it. This writer, me, myself, has lost count of how many times I've seen prominent Afro-Brazilian women involved with white men, be they politicians, models, athletes, actresses, what have you. The difference here is that it has been black women who have consistently spoken on an issue that does need to be discussed. If you've read any of these posts over the last few years, it should be well known that white Brazilian elites started an open goal of making the black population disappear through the encouragement of embranquecimento, or whitening, and the progressive amalgamation of black people with white partners. That was in the latter part of the 19th century, as the ending of slavery became inevitable and elites wondered what to do with a population that was about to be 2/3 non-white. What we are seeing today is the fruit of this plot that had a strong ally in a most unlikely source, the black population itself. So this is just covering this. How can we this form of social engineering that took place in Brazil starting in the late 19th century, where it says, look, we have too many non-white people here. We need to encourage them to mix so that within a few generations, black skin will actually disappear in the country. So this is a story I did back in, I think it's 2013. And it was just it's really a good representation of how race relations are seen, and this social engineering that says we want to whiten the country. This has to do with two beauty contests that were going on in the country. One in which a black girl was elected in a city that's vastly overwhelmingly white. 80-85% white is the city, Miss Florianopolis 2013. Whereas in Bahia, in the Northeast, now Florianopolis is a capital city in one of the southern states of Brazil. And some people were just like, why is she considered the representative of this city when most women in Florianopolis look white? On the other hand, you had a contest in mostly non-white Bahia, and people made an issue out of this. Like, a lot of the women that was in this contest, you could say they were Brazilian white, or some of them are just clearly white. But it was a question of, why is there a lack of brown and darker skinned black women in a contest in a state where most of the people are black or brown? So this whole story goes into the history. It just talks about what I was just talking about, Brazilian elites wanting the black population to disappear, from the physical presence of people with clearly identifiable black traits. The idea was they need to disappear. So this is a piece where I was just talking about how this played out in these two states, one majority white and one majority black, in Tree and Peace. It was only in recent years when we got even black Brazilian women winning the Miss Brazil competition. It was almost, I think it was at one point in 60 years of the Miss Brazil beauty contest, only one black woman had ever won that contest. And then, I don't know, it had to have been about 3-4 years ago, two black women won back to back. But, I predicted it would go back to normal with the white winners, and that's exactly what happened. So anyway, let's see, where was I at here? So, as written in the past, the policy here would be that any Afro-Brazilian man who wanted to speak on this issue would have space here, so that we can see a more balanced dialogue, as well as initiate a conversation that needs to take place if Black Brazilians are ever to move forward as a people. Below, we bring a short but honest and personal piece, a follow-up of sorts to another piece by the same author that acknowledges how this facet of white supremacy plays out in the minds of many Black Brazilian men. So the same author wrote this piece also, what is it called? Sexuality, fetishization of the Black male body in Brazil. So anybody who's familiar with this topic in the United States, this is something that is pretty common in Brazil as well. You have obviously when men have access to all types of different women, a lot of men take that as, a compliment, like how can I complain about that? But somewhere along the line, some black men were starting to pick up like, well, some of these women may not be interested in me as a person, but they may be interested in me because of the stereotype that comes along with black males, right? So this is another piece that was written by the same author a few years ago. So anyway, let's get into this piece, the hypersexualization and the self-esteem of the black man by Fala Pretinho. As I'm reading this piece, I'm gonna every now and then you'll see a picture of a popular Afro-Brazilian man, whether he be an actor, a singer, an athlete, or whatever. Just introducing my audience to some popular personalities of black men in Brazil. So this is the piece by Fala Pretinho, Hypersexualization and the Self-Esteem of the Black Man. The book Pele Negra, Máscaras Brancas, which is Black Skin, White Mask, the classic by Frantz Fanon, was a watershed in my life. It's amazing how even being written in another country in another time, it reflects quite well the way Black people deal with issues, or rather racial issues in society. Chapter 2, entitled O Homem de Cor e a Mulher Branca, or The Man of Color and the White Woman, brought in the first 2 paragraphs words that fell upon me like a bomb. It was the part that made me understand why Black men prefer, in general, white women, but also brought me many questions later. So that book by Frantz Fanon, I think it was from 1952. I read that book, years ago. I mean, his work still applies to what you see today. So when this book was translated into Portuguese, it woke up a lot of Black men like, wow, So no matter where you are in the world, where you had the situation where descendants of Africans who were enslaved with the people who are their descendants of the slave owners, you still have this dynamic where, the white population is deemed to be more valuable or superior than the non-white population. So this is he obviously he just read the book by Frantz Fanon. So he's reacting. He's just telling, how this book struck him. I remember a few years ago, I considered my love life as part of my activism. The fact spoke in terms of me having relationships and dating white women made me feel equal to white men, as if I were also capable, also a man. It didn't matter what the reason was for the girl being interested in me. I accepted and made of it a victory against racism. Listen to what he's saying here. This idea of, I think it was Eldridge Cleaver who once wrote in his book, like when he puts his black hands around a white woman's breast, he's like gripping freedom. If I'm not mistaken, he says something to that degree. And this is equally what this guy is saying here. It's like he's not even considering black women. He's considering white women because he wants to be on par with white men. So if I can get a white woman, a white man's woman, then I can be equal to the white man. So he didn't even really care. It didn't matter the reason the girl was interested in me. He accepted it as a victory against racism. Like, in essence, he's putting the white woman he was dating on a pedestal and carrying them around as a trophy. We all know that just because you date across racial lines does not necessarily mean that perceived racial, in the thoughts of people, the perceived racial superiority of one group or the other doesn't mean everybody doesn't. It doesn't mean that everybody believes that mythology no longer exists. And it also doesn't mean that the partner you land with is absolutely not racist. That doesn't necessarily prove anything. It is a matter to be reflected because for us black men, for years, we had as our only advantage in relation to white men the sexual issue. Men are very competitive with each other in the amorous sexual question. And basically all black men that I know in life, including myself, have boasted as some time of having a big penis and being more of a man in bed. So here you see, this is what he's talking about. I once asked this question of a friend of mine. It's like, okay, we know that whether a black male is an athlete or whatever he might be, we know these stereotypes come with just being a black male. And in some ways, it takes away from Black males being fully able to be full human beings without being looked at as, just like a walk-in sex tool or a sexual stereotype. And so my question was, because I know a lot of Black men played along with this image, this stereotype that every Black man's walking around with a third leg, right? My question was, if Black men were to be seen as full human beings rather than great athletes or, walking sexual devices or whatever the stereotype might be, if we got rid of that idea in exchange for being a full human being, being accepted as a full human being, could Black men part with that stereotype? That was my question some years ago. Anyway, continuing with this piece, we accepted this hypersexualization like a lullaby. It was that or nothing. We were not princes, magazine models, or magazine heartthrobs. We weren't the men with whom the girls dreamed of marrying, dating, etc. But at least there were some white girls who used us when they wanted to try something different, which is exactly what I'm talking about. Not necessarily interested in marrying you or having a long-term relationship with you, but just trying a different flavor and then probably going back to the type of guys that she prefers. And that really massaged the ego. So he's basically he's saying what, this is what Black women have all said, like stroking your ego. It's not enough for you to pursue Black women. You have to pursue white women in order to make yourself, to raise your esteem, to show off your ego, make you feel worthy or something. And this is what being with white women chose him, even just using him sexually. He says that really massaged the ego. And even with our knowing this, it was as if it was some kind of reward that for some was the elevation of self-esteem. For me, strangely, it was the combat to racism. Today, I understand that relações afrocentradas, or Afro-centered relationships, or relationships between two Black people in essence, are first for the appreciation of Black women, but also for the abandonment of this acceptance of the fetish that was given to Black men. When we go on to see ourselves as whole men beyond the sexual issue or performances of porn films, we will stop being enchanted with the fetishization made by white women. That's definitely an article I got to check out. We will cease to be the negão, the big Black man, the stud, the straight up Black man. It's, this term that's applied to a lot of Black men in Brazil. More and more people are looking at it like, I don't want people calling me the negão. All right. In order to be the Black man, we will cease to be the negão in order to be the Black man, is what he's saying. So less of the stereotype, more of the full person. And from then, we will cease to understand relations as trophies, and we will value more those with similar experiences as ours, who will love us as men and not as objects of pleasure. And until that happens, we continue deconstructing. So you get what he's saying here. After years of feeling this elevated sense of self-esteem because he was chosen by white women, he's now saying, like, look, we need to start valuing ourselves as Black people. We need to start valuing and getting together with our equals. Moving away from Black men being used as tools of sexual pleasure in the same way a lot of Black women expressed the idea that they felt the same way. So this is something that I find intriguing, because this the development of Afro-Brazilian identity and the desire of having more relationships between Black men and Black women is something that's been on the rise. It's only going to be in the future that we're going to see if this is something that really happens in Brazil or if it's just a fad or something, because this is the first time I've ever seen in their history where they have Black Brazilian men and women are expressing the idea that we need to get together, Black men and Black women. Because as I've said just numerous times, they've always been taught that it's better to get with a white person. Not only will you be more accepted in society, but also you'll produce whiter kids. So a couple of things I just wanted to go through to discuss, and then also go and take a look at the couple of the links that I have here. So one of the notes says, over the years, many Afro-Brazilian militants, university students, and bloggers have referred to Fanon's black skin, white mask, and realizing how pertinent the work is in understanding the situation in Brazil. Capricho magazine. Okay, I don't really need to get into that, but intriguing piece. This hypersexualization and fetishization piece written by, what's the author's name? Let's see, his name is, if I'm not mistaken, it's Kyle Cesar. So not only did he write this piece, but there was another piece that I translated and placed on the blog as well. I think it was this one here. This is Sexuality, Racial Imagery, and the Fetishization of the Black Male Body in Brazil, Part 1. And so this is obviously something that he's, he felt the necessity of speaking on some of these stereotypes that go along with just being a black male in Brazil. So as I said, I wanted to deal with a couple more of the linked articles that I had up here because they're also pertinent to the piece that I just did. This one here was someone's breakdown of the appearance of this particular black character in one of Brazil's novellas. This piece is from 2015, and the article is called "You Can Be a Man in Bed, but Outside of It: The Tragedy of Hypersexualization of the Black Man in a New Primetime Novella." So you got a scene of this black man who is this woman's chauffeur. So they're just basically showing how there was a scene in this novella where the character played by this actor right here, this is Camila Pitanga, popular actress. He was basically, he's the chauffeur of this woman. And she basically said something in one of the scenes like, look, you can be a man in bed, but outside, it's a line that summarizes the sexual objectification and dehumanization that the Cristóvão character suffers in the plot. The character Beatriz situates Cristóvão in his place as a subordinate, black driver, lover, blackmailer, opportunist. The meteoric and tragic fate of the character is determined by his own boss that kills him and excludes him from her game of interests and desires. So I have to go back. I didn't watch this novella, but it was intriguing, this breakdown, because often in a lot of Brazil's novellas, black males, somebody had did a report on this, a whole book and a documentary, just showing the different types of stereotypical roles that Afro-Brazilian men will play in these ever popular novellas in Brazil. There'll be the gardener, the security guy, the chauffeur, the thief, the hustler, all of these type of stereotypes, the criminal. So this is just another example of the role that black people, particularly black males, when people see black people in the streets, they automatically assume they have to be one of these type of people. I did a piece some time ago where they showed how you could take a black male and a white male, put them in the same suit, and people will interpret them in different positions in terms of their professions. Like you see a white man dressed a certain way, he must be the CEO of a company, but you see a black man in the same suit and he must be a security guard at the mall. Right? What else we have here? The disappointment. This was another, once again, it just shows we're all equal. This is a story about a popular white girl who's a blogger, Jojo, I don't know how you pronounce that. Never followed her blog, but she was a popular blogger. This piece is from 2015. And she would frequently talk about her boyfriend on this blog. And so, you having this successful woman having a blog and a lot of followers, people automatically assumed that her boyfriend had to be white. And then when they saw him, it was like, you see the reaction here, like, okay, this can't be your boyfriend. Like really, a white successful girl like yourself, and this is your fabulous prince. The article that I just read, like, black men are not thought to be the shining prince. He always has to be white. So even this guy being light skinned, he's not what people assumed all the time that she was blogging. They were just picturing what type of boyfriend she must have had. And then when they come to see, okay, this guy's on the light skinned side, but he's still clearly black. And they were just like, oh my God, that's your boyfriend. Anyway, so these are just a couple of pieces that I wanted to highlight that went along with the piece that I just did. Again, the piece that I read today was from Kyle Cesar. So for now, I'm going to end this video here. I'm curious to know what your thoughts were on this particular video. Again, to put it in context for future articles that I'm going through, more videos that I will be making. So if you got some out of this video, I would like to hear what you thought. Leave a drop a comment in the comment section. Consider sharing this video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely click on that notification button so you'll be one of the first people alerted when I get a new video that goes up. So with that said, I hope to see you all in the next video.